No one likes being disappointed in a movie. In today's climate of wall-to-wall hype for upcoming mega blockbusters, it's hard to stomach paying hard-earned money to watch a giant waste of potential. What really cuts deep, however, are films that come dangerously close to greatness, yet miss out on lodging themselves in your heart through one simple error of judgment. You can't even tear these movies apart. They're too good for that, but ultimately, something feels a little lost. I'm Plumpy from Whatculture.com, and here are 10 movies one mistake away from being masterpieces. Number 10, The Cabin in the Woods. The big mistake, the end. The Cabin in the Woods is so close to perfection, with Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon crafting an hilarious, scary, and biting satire on bloodlust in cinema. The sting in the tail of CIT dub is that in order to keep mysterious, world-consuming gods aslumber, teens of certain archetypes must be sacrificed in rituals that come copy-pasted from tvtropes.org. There's only one problem: all this info comes in a massive expo dump delivered by Sigourney Weaver right at the end of the film. A movie that successfully skewers so many tropes succumbing to evil boss carefully outlays evil plan right at the very last moment does have an effect of lessening the impact of the ending just a smidge. Number 9, Cloud Atlas. The big mistake, what is it all about? Given that it's now 14 years since The Matrix, you'd have expected the Wachowskis to have followed up on their breakthrough success by now. The closest they've come has been Cloud Atlas, but the real issue is that the film never makes it clear what's going on. The cast played different characters in each time period, but the in-world reason for this, or the recurring birthmark, is left up in the air. It's clear there's some sort of message here, but what it is left irritatingly ambiguous. Now, to be clear, there shouldn't be a big monologue at the end to explain everything, a la The Cabin in the Woods, but for a film trying so hard to show that everything is connected, Cloud Atlas ultimately doesn't draw those connections. Number 8, Spider-Man 3. The big mistake, having Sandman. While the third part of the trilogy retains a lot of Raimi's camp, earnest charm, and it is better than you think it is, there's such a huge influx of new characters, none of whom are properly explored, that it ultimately makes the film feel hollow. The simple fix? Remove the Sandman. We go into this in more detail in our How They Should Have Made Spider-Man 3 video, go and watch that, but Sandman really doesn't add anything to the movie, which is a shame, because in Raimi's mind, he was the heart and soul of the whole thing. However, in a movie about good and evil within Spider-Man, shortchanging Venom, the bad Spider-Man, to give unneeded minutes to the human sandcastle ends up crippling the film. Number 7, Zero Dark 30. The big mistake, you can't tell what's happening in the climax. The death of Osama bin Laden radically changed the ending to Zero Dark 30. The news meant that the film, which remains mostly excellent by the way, shifted focus from the early days of CIA's biggest ever manhunt to following Jessica Chastain through the past decade up to that fateful night. The only problem with the change is the ending. Half the time the audience isn't able to see a thing, and it's clear what the intention was. War is confusing hell after all, but it ultimately has the effect of pushing us out of the film at a critical moment, straining to see what was happening rather than being invested in the action. Number 6, Django Unchained. The big mistake, one too many endings. Quentin Tarantino is one of the best movie craftsmen alive, but he's not without his bad habits, and self-indulgence is definitely a fair accusation. Django Unchained is a movie of excess, both in violence and in verbiage, but it's also compelling, funny, and beautifully paced right up until the false ending. Everything comes to a head with a climactic shootout in Candyland, and right when it feels like the movie has come to a natural, thrilling conclusion, it limps on for another 20 plus minutes. No spoilers here, and ultimately Django is very good, but it comes maddeningly close to great. Number 5, Stranger Than Fiction. The mistake, it wussed out. It's always nice to see noted rubber-faced comedians take on existential dramedies. It worked beautifully for Jim Carrey in The Truman Show, and Will Ferrell's Stranger Than Fiction is so close to following suit, but not quite. The film's about a man who realizes that his life is being written by a novelist who's determined his fate from the outset. The big problem is, in order for her story to satisfyingly end, he has to die. The big emotional heft of the movie is Ferrell coming to terms with that fact. In the end, however, his protagonist survives, making a lot of what came before it mean much less. Number 4, The Tree of Life. The big mistake, the stuff in space. Terrence Malick's epic has very little concern for conventional storytelling, throwing a purposefully meandering tale of small-town American childhood against the backdrop of all of space and time in a very on-the-nose way of saying, life is both important and not important at the same time. The stuff in the past with Jessica Chastain and Brad Pitt is all beautifully acted, more than conveying the small devastations of life that manage to be huge and tiny all at once. It's just the film keeps going back to its cosmic backdrop in slow, near interminable vistas of stars and space dust. Don't get me wrong, they're all very pretty desktop screensavers, but they continually slow the pace of the movie to a dead stop until you're begging begging to get back to the otherwise beautiful tale of human life. Number 3, Prometheus, the big mistake trying to not be an Alien movie. After watching the functional but empty Alien Covenant, you realize that so much of Prometheus is so much better than you remember. Problem is, it still doesn't add up to anything more than a confusing jumble that ultimately got cold feet as to whether it was an Alien film or not. In trying not to be an Alien movie, they made a film that felt odd, contradictory, and ironically, alien to its fan base. Number 2, Sunshine, the big mistake, the shift in tone. Sunshine is one of Danny Boyle's most underrated pieces, telling the incredibly tense story of a last-ditch mission to reignite the sun and save a frozen Earth. Where Sunshine falters is in its final half hour. Up until then, we've been treated to some believable science, Brian Cox was an advisor on the film, and some beautiful sequences. The spacewalk is breathtaking. But once Mark Strong's character, a crazed captain of a previous mission who survived 7 years on sunlight alone, starts killing people, it spirals into typical slasher territory, stylistically brilliant slasher territory, but it's a jarring change that derails the film all the same. And number 1, Red Dragon. The big mistake, putting too much focus on Hannibal. What's this? Brett Ratner makes a film that could have been a masterpiece? It's true. With Red Dragon, Ratner tells a tense, brutal story of a killer called the Tooth Fairy and its beautiful performances all round. An adaptation of Robert Harris's first Hannibal novel, it covered very similar ground to Michael Mann's Manhunter, but for every technological advantage that Ratner's film had over that film, there's a detraction. Manhunter used Brian Cox for Hannibal Lecter in an effective but minor role. However, when Silence of the Lambs gave us Oscar winner Anthony Hopkins, it became clear Hannibal was what people wanted. In response to this, the bad doctor's role in Red Dragon is beefed up heavily from the book. Hannibal works best as a support to a greater story, hence why Hannibal and Hannibal Rising failed, and the over-reliance on him in Red Dragon detracts from the film's better moments. And that's our list. Did we miss any out? Tell us about it in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter here. I'm Plumpy from Whatculture.com, and I'll see you soon.